Welcome back, everyone, to my round 6 recap of the Abu Dhabi Masters Tournament. I just finished the game about 10 minutes ago, so things are still very fresh. Adrenaline is slowly drifting down, but very intense game. And let's get into it. I was playing a player by the name of Reza Mahdavi from Iran, and he's about, I think, 14, maybe 15 years old. Young, talented player, and I found a lot of games online of his, so I was able to predict the opening in this game, which was a bishop b5 check Sicilian, and I should note yesterday was a rest day, so I had a lot of time to prepare. And I mean, there was only one game today at 5 p.m. So several hours before the game, I was reviewing my lines, and I prepared pretty deeply into a line that we ended up going into. After traded bishops, my opponent goes for the so-called Marazzi bind setup, and let me make sure. Oh, let me make sure I'm hiding notation, but I guess I'm also leaking the fact that I was preparing for my opponent's Lichess account. And maybe I'll leave this open because there is an interesting tidbit after the line that we went into. I mean, this is all standard opening theory. We got to this position, and my opponent played knight b3 here. And if we see, based on his Lichess games, he has played knight b3 once before, and it's one of the best moves in the position. And thankfully, I was prepared for this move before the game. So let me hide the notation here and try and avoid any spoilers. But knight b3 was played. There are a few other moves. Like, he's played b3 a lot in like blitz and bullets, but b3 walks into takes, and b5. And this is one of the threats of a6, is I do want to take and play b5. So there's another main line here, queen d3, which I think is considered to be also one of the more testing variations. And then I had a ton more prep from this position. There were some lines I was preparing like 30, 35 moves deep. So we didn't go into any of it, and maybe I'll save the prep for a future game. But yeah, knight b3 was played, and I went for knight e5, and now c5. And I'll actually leave this to show because this is not an anonymous account. Like, his username is Tamo Jerry. It was pretty easy to look up. So he has played this game once. It was a blitz or bullet game. Let's see. This is a blitz game from 3 months ago. So I had looked at this game before the round, and I followed exactly what his opponent played. Knight c4, take, and then rook c8. And here he finally deviated from the game. Rather than taking the pawn, he played rook ad1. I was actually prepared for kind of a cool trap. If he were to take, I would take with the queen and then say, oh no, I'm getting forked. And if he does fork, this is already, I think, close to winning for black after knight d5. And yeah, I was prepared further here. Takes, rook fe8, rook f2, and then key move bishop takes c3, deviating from his game. And if we got to this position, I would be very happy, and the engine should say that black is yeah, close to winning. So we didn't go into that, and we got a fresh position, rook to d1. And just to give a sense of like the thoroughness of my prep, I was also prepared for this move, and I played queen c7, just getting off the file of the rook. And I remember when I looked at this position a few hours before the game, I thought it was weird that the engine says this is okay for black, because at first it doesn't look that great, given the pawn is isolated, and white has very good control over the d5 square. But I looked into this position a bit with the engine, and it came up with some interesting ideas, a few of which I managed to play in the game. So rook c1 was played, and I play rook to e8. And one of the main ideas for black in this position is to break with d5 eventually, especially because the rook is aligned with the white queen. This pawn is currently pinned. but it's not so easy to do because there's also alignment on the c file. So we played a couple more moves, rook fd1, get the queen off the file. And here I think my opponent played the first, I don't know if it's a clear mistake or dubious move of the game, but rook d2, which looks very natural, perhaps intending to double up on the d file. But I think this move was a little bit negligent of one of my ideas. Now, when he played rook d2, the first move that came to mind was d5, which is probably a playable move. But then I realized there's a different idea in this position, and it's actually a pretty rare type of tactical idea. But the key thing to be aware of is the queen and both rooks are aligned on this diagonal. So it'd be really, really nice if I could somehow threaten bishop h6. And there is one way to do that. Let me hide notation now so I don't spoil anything further. The only way to do that is to play queen f8. So this is essentially a retreating attacking move, because now I have a clear threat of bishop h6. And the strength of bishop h6 is not that I'm necessarily winning material because white has f4, but the whole point is to provoke white to play f4, after which the pawns are a bit softer and they'd be easier to exploit. So yeah, so queen f8, it's a nice tactical idea that will lead to some positional advantage for black. And after this move, things were going very well. I played bishop h6, provoke f4, played b5. Because white played f4, now the e4 pawn is a lot more vulnerable, and I'm already threatening pawn b4 to chase away the knight and win the pawn. So he played a3 here, and now I keep adding pressure, rook c4, attacking the pawn from multiple directions, and he plays rook d4, trying to neutralize. I play queen e7, continuing the pressure, and my queen served its purpose on f8 to support this move, so it can now go back. And I was really happy with this move, because not only am I applying more pressure along the e-file, but there's some nice ideas of potentially going for knight g4, queen h4, or to play queen a7 to exploit the diagonal, the a7, g1 diagonal. And white has to be really careful here not to lose immediately. Like, for example, if he takes the rook, I take, and then let's say knight d2, I think knight g4 is already winning for black, because if the queen leaves this diagonal, queen a7 is pretty much lights out for white. King f1, knight h2 is mate, and king h1, there's going to be some fun windmill. So that didn't happen. Instead, he played pawn g3, which I think is probably the best try for white in the position, solidifying a pawn and giving some luft for the king as well. So I played knight g4. He plays queen e2. And then I played queen a7. When I played this move, I thought, for some reason, I thought I would be winning material, but I just missed his next move, king to g2, which is a pretty simple way to kind of deal with the pressure in the position. And I should note that yeah, after queen a7, I leave the knight hanging, but if he were to take it, I wouldn't take the rook right away. I would play bishop g7, and I'm pretty sure black will be winning the exchange here because there's just no way to resolve the pinned rook on d4. So king g2 was a resourceful move from white, and I take, and play f5. So white is definitely not out of danger yet, just because all the pressure is still very much alive in the position. And yeah, the e-pawn is pinned, the knight is hanging, my knight is now defended, so I'm threatening to take on d4. So he plays queen d2, and I play bishop g7. So yeah, the bishop served its purpose on h6 to provoke f4, so it returns to the long diagonal. And he played knight f3. And in this position, I played a very committal move. But during the game, I was happy with it. I decided to give up my dark squared bishop. And generally, this is just not a move you want to play unless it leads to some clear advantage. And I played bishop takes c3, thinking that I would be winning a pawn. And I did win a pawn after pawn takes takes, takes, takes. And oh, there was actually a funny line here, which actually, if we go back, before I played bishop takes c3, there's actually a really nice calculation that involves kind of a temporary queen sacrifice for black to get a completely winning endgame. So I'll go ahead and show the line, but it's essentially what we got in the game. And here he played knight d4, but if he were to play queen d5, which looks like it just wins back the pawn, I can just play king g7, white will take, and now queen to f2. And for a very brief moment, it looks like white is still holding on. But there's a really nice move for black in this position, and perhaps I gave a bit of a clue earlier, but it's to take on h2 and say, oh no, my queen, but then win it right back. And this would be a winning endgame for black, up a pawn and winning another pawn and probably winning a third pawn too. So I'm also realizing there's queen f1 here, although I don't know if that works after king h4, because my king is also vulnerable. So anyway, that could have been a funny line, but that didn't happen because after takes, takes, he played knight to d4. And I was feeling really, really good here, having just won a pawn, and it seems like white's not getting much compensation for it. On top of that, I realize that the timestamps aren't here, but he was falling pretty low on time. He had maybe about 5 minutes around this point, and I had perhaps 15 to 20 minutes. So things were looking very good for me. I played queen c5 relatively quickly, and then he played a4. And I think in this position, I got a little bit careless, and I played the move queen d5, thinking, oh, I'm so clever, threatening a discovered check to win white's queen. But I just completely overlooked his next move, queen e2. And then all of a sudden, my extra pawn might be coming off the board, given my knight is attacked and b5 is attacked 3 times. So I think queen d5 was just a very careless move on my part. After the game, he told me I probably should have played queen c4, which now that I'm looking at this just looks really, really good for black, because I prevent queen a2 check, I control the e2 square, and if takes, takes, yeah, everything looks to be under control for black, like knight f6 and d5 coming. So somewhat of a regret not playing queen c4. But after queen d5, I still thought I was playing for a win. After queen e2, I play e3, king to g1. But then around here, I realized it's really not so simple. And there's some concrete problems to address, given my knight's attacked, my pawn's still attacked, and e3 pawn looks a bit overextended. And when I played e3, I thought I could go for this move, knight f2, but I don't think this works. Like, even though I'm threatening mate in 1 with queen h1, he can take. And now queen h1, there's king f2. But I was looking at knight h3, forcing king f1, queen h1, king e2 takes. But I don't think this leads to much after, let's say, king e1. And my knight's just really out of play. Like queen h1, the king's going to zigzag to safety. And it could be my king that is just very naked in the position. So I didn't go for this. And instead I played queen h5, defending the knight, but also ensuring that I'm pressuring the h-pawn. And then after takes, takes, I think here he played a very good move, h4. And yeah, here I realized that whatever advantage I had pretty much slipped away. And I was also getting low on time here. But the game keeps going. I played knight f6, offering a queen trade. And for some reason, when I played this move, I thought he was going to take, completely forgetting that my e3 pawn just drops. So sometimes this happens in chess where your advantage slips, and then it can just turn into a whole downward spiral. And yeah, once he took on e3, I realized that I should just hunker down and not make things worse. So I play queen g4, preventing queen e6 check and pressuring the pawn. He plays king to g2, I should note that if he takes a pawn here, then I have some annoying checks. And this should be fine for black. So after king g2, play queen d7, and then he plays f5. And I think somewhere around here, maybe after queen g4, I'd offered a draw, but he declined it. And it was clear that he was trying to go for more than just a draw. But after it takes queen g5, king f7, he takes. Looks like my king is a bit vulnerable, but I have queen to c6 and queen takes c3. And yeah, there's no mating attack for whites. My knight does a good job of controlling some key squares. And he took on d6. If he plays queen g7, I just have this move, and everything is fine for black. So he took on d6, and I believe he offered a draw in this position. And I was getting really low on time. I think we both had maybe around 2 minutes here, and I agreed to the draw. But then right after I agreed to it, he told me that I could have played on. He told me I could have played this, takes, check, here, and queen d1. And I was looking at lines like this, but I really didn't think I had much winning chances here, being down a pawn. I mean, I know black has a mate in one threat, but there's going to be some knight check, like knight c7. And we were analyzing this briefly, like king f7, and then white has probably king h2, or although king h2, there's queen c2 winning the knight. Maybe I could have gone for this. Anyway, now I think it's time to look at the engine and see the key moments in this game, perhaps the key mistakes. Is this actually better for black? No. Just king g2 here. Yeah, white's fine. The knight's defended. I have some checks, but nothing more. So I want to go back further because just to verify the blunder. Oh, wow. a4 is just an equalizing move. Now, I really thought I was like much better here, but so did I go wrong earlier? Wait, let's go back to this position. I played bishop g7, and we just played the top. Oh, no. Oh, he should have taken with the queen. Queen takes e3 is a difficult move to play. My mistake was queen c5. And kudos to him for finding the only equalizing move, a4. Because he played this move with like 3 minutes left. Maybe 4 minutes left. So I should have played knight f6. Just prophylaxis, like holding the position together, ensuring the knight and pawn are no longer so loose. a4, I can take it. Okay, so I had a chance this game. I mean, it wasn't completely winning. It felt like a really nice game up until this, up until the point that he kind of switched the momentum. But it was a fun one. I'm not too disappointed, even though it felt like I had chances. I think a draw is still a very solid result. And my opponent's been having a really good tournament. I think he's been and drawn a handful of players much higher than him. So I guess I'm another victim, or another half victim. But yeah, the tournament keeps going. That was round 6. So I'm still at 50%, 3 out of 6. Tomorrow will be round 7. And this is a 9-round tournament. And maybe what I'll do right before the video ends, I'll go ahead and share the standings of the tournament. I've been linking this in every video, the Lichess broadcast. But if you go to this page and then click results, you can see the overall results. And sorry if the layout's off, but we can go to ranking list. Oh, the round 6 is currently underway, but we can see the standings after round 5. And we see, yeah, Ray Robson is actually, he was in clear first going into this round. I think he drew Von Forest. So go Ray. We both traveled to Abu Dhabi from St. Louis. We can also see Irene is doing very well. I think she won this round too. So I'm definitely cheering on my friends. And if you scroll down far enough, you can find my name. I'm currently, yeah, currently, I was at 50%. I'm still at 50%. So as usual, I'll leave a link to the broadcast, the pairings and standings in the video description. And if you made this far, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.